Hello and welcome to Man's Model Moments. I mentioned in my Best Beaufort video that ICM reached out to me a couple of months ago about reviewing some of their releases, and the first of these that arrived was this parcel here. Now inside the parcel were a couple of ICM catalogues, but they're not really the focus for today. No. That is the 1/72nd Mig-29 Ghost of Kyiv and its associated paint set. So taking a look at the paints first, ICM supply these in 12mm pots, making them a little larger than Tamiya's 10mm and a bit smaller compared to other 17mm acrylics like AK and Vallejo. ICM's price point is lower however, making them about 11 pence per mil compared to about 13 for Vallejo and 20 for Tamiya. The Ghost of Kyiv set contains 5 paints: off-white, sky grey, dark sea grey, German grey, black grey, plus a satin varnish. The main event of course is the kit itself, which comes in ICM's usual glossy outer with a stout inner top-opening flip lid box. Inside is the bag containing the sprues, instructions, and a leaflet on paint. Starting with the instructions, these are glossy with a front sheet of history and paint descriptions. Inside are parts tree diagrams indicating unused parts in this kit, and numbering, and the clear, simple instructions. The rear has a full colour paint and decal guide, which is nicely printed and very clear. The kit itself consists of just 3 main sprue frames bagged together. The sprues themselves are moulded in quite soft plastic, with nice recessed detail, and though I am loath to make the comparison given the current conflict, the moulding seems quite similar to that of a modern Zvezda kit. That's perhaps a little surprising if you're familiar with modern ICM toolings, which are much crisper, but this stems from the fact that this is a 2022 boxing of ICM's much older 2008 Mig-29, so it lacks the level of finesse of their current kits. That said, it's still a nice moulding, just a little softer than the more recent offerings. The transparencies are separately bagged within the main bag and look sharp and clear. Taking a closer look at the castings, you can see there is a little flash in places, such as the upper air intakes, though nothing alarming. You can also see the recessed panel line detail on the fuselage. Areas like the rear engine guards are nicely done, and there is also moulded detail in the undercarriage bays. Moving on to the aerofoil surfaces, the vertical stabilisers have good detail, including the prominent rudder actuators. Here you can see the engraved detail compared to my scalpel, showing how thin it is and just deeper for the control surface joins. Small areas like these additional intakes are nicely cast with hollowed entrances. Here you can see there is good detail on the instrument panel, though there is some flash on this large pin in the cockpit tub itself. There are some other casting pins present, though to be fair, these aren't visible when the model is constructed. The kit also comes with a decent complement of air-to-air weapons, as well as 3 fuel tanks that aren't used in this version of the kit. You can also see the undercarriage pieces here are nicely detailed with some fine casting on several of the struts. First impressions therefore are of a pretty decent little kit. Now for those of you who have seen my paint sorting video, you'll have seen me use these little paint chits before. So what I'm doing is painting over this chit, which has been primed in white, grey and black to allow me to assess the behaviour of the paint. I also then scan these, convert them into LAB values, which then allows me to calculate the best paint for any given shade as a starter, but that's another story. For the purposes of this video, I'm just going over these with each paint to give me an idea of thickness, how it acts, density, coverage and finish. The ICM paints are easy to use with a brush straight from the pot, as they're not as thick as other acrylics I've used like AK, Vallejo, Army Painter and so on. I expect they won't need as much thinner added for spraying, but I'll cover that in my Beaufort review soon. Colour density is pretty good too, though you'll need at least 2 coats for complete coverage, especially for the light colours, which is pretty common especially when brush painting. The paints do dry pretty quickly. It seemed to me more quickly than other brands, and to a very matte finish, which is why I expect they supply a semi-gloss varnish with the sets. In fact, overall I was pretty impressed with the paints, and being a range of greys I expect they'll get a lot of use in the future. The only thing I don't really like about them is the fact they're not in dropper bottles, which are my preferred format for any paint since they make controlled dispensing easier, they don't dry out as quickly, and they don't spill when knocked over. I certainly wouldn't be put off by the 12mm size either, since unless you're painting something huge, 12mm is going to be more than enough for most projects, and the price point makes it easy to buy multiple bottles should you need to. So onto the main build of the kit. Overall this is a pretty simple build, but you do need to be careful about cleanup, since there are some mould lines and prominent pins and flash on some areas of the model as you can see here. These aren't a huge issue, and the soft plastic makes these relatively easy to deal with on the whole. There are also a couple of holes for the landing gear locating lugs which need opening up or deepening, which are not supposed to be closed, and this is better tackled earlier than later on. The plastic reacts quickly to cement, probably because it is quite soft. I don't have an issue with this, but I know from complaints on Airfix's plastic that some modelers prefer harder styrene, so just be aware. There are a couple of things to watch out for in the build, the first being the air intakes, which have a prominent seam down their length that needs filling later on, as well as their join with the rear fuselage. Nothing out of the ordinary, but it was the main area I needed any filling on this model. The alignment of these is also worth paying attention to, since there are no positive locating pins to guide you here, and it would be easy to get this off a little bit. As I had the recommended paints, I decided to hand paint this kit, and so I tackled the cockpit and other areas that needed to be off-white. I thinned the paint down a little with water and put down an initial coat, knowing that I'd need several to provide coverage, but I wanted to preserve that detail. Next were the undercarriage bays, wheels, and undercarriage. Then coming back with the dark grey for the tyres, before finally giving everything an oil wash with black Tamiya panel line accent. I blacked out the dials and the instrument panel and covered them with pledge. I should also note that the Decals supplied does not match up with this instrument panel. The simple ejection seat fits into the cockpit with no issues, and the fuselage halves can then be joined up. This assembly does require clamping, and I would have preferred the nose cone to be a separate piece to avoid having to sand the seam down. The resulting body is pretty sound however, and the wings are next to go on. I was initially uncertain how well these would work, but they fit perfectly with just the small tab securing them. Vertical stabilisers were next, and although the right one fit perfectly at the correct angle, the left one's locating tab had it positioned way too far back. And so did require a little surgery. At this point the seams and joins were filled and sanded, these primarily being around the nose, air intakes and sides by the horizontal stabilisers. The latter were then added, and I was onto the smaller pieces. Exhaust and the weapon pylons were all added with no issues. Small items like the top ram intake were then added, though these you have no positive locating guides and are a bit of a matter of guesswork, so check your references here. I wanted to use the ICM paints exclusively where possible on this kit, so the upper surfaces were given an undiluted coat of off-white to key the plastic and act as a primer. The thinner ICM paint allows this to be applied without much in the way of brush marks, and the paint went on well with no issues, and as I mentioned before, dried pretty quickly. Once that was completely dry, I then applied several coats of diluted off-white with a wide brush, working subsequent coats perpendicular to one another to minimise any visible brush marks. I applied sky grey to the undersides in a similar manner when the upper surfaces were complete. For the transparencies, I masked these with Tamiya tape and masking putty, sprayed them with white automotive primer and then painted over this in the appropriate colours. Here you can see the painted airframe completed with nose and anti-glare panel both picked out with the ICM paints. Now of course the main focus of this aircraft is the striking digital camouflage applied to Ukrainian Mig-29s, and this kit achieves this with a large set of decals to go over the base off-white coat. I decided to work from the port front to the rear, easing myself in gently with a small panel at the beginning, cutting this from the sheet and putting it in warm water for about 30 seconds. This is the first time I've used ICM decals, and they do take some getting used to. They're not the easiest to work with, having a tendency to not want to move when they're in position, which makes placement of these more difficult than I was expecting. Care, patience and copious amounts of water under the decal do pay off though, and I got it into place. The main central camo is covered by a single huge decal, and I think this was a mistake. It didn't quite reach across the front, left to right, and seemed a little large at the back, and it was not an easy task to get it into position. The saving grace of these decals is that they are quite tough, and hold up under a lot of manipulation, which is just as well because you're going to be doing a lot of it. Once you get used to how they work, however, they do become easy to use, and a good point is that they're hard to accidentally knock out of position. After they dried, I went back and cut the front areas of the large decal to allow it to conform more easily, and there was enough excess from other areas to fill in the small gaps. After leaving the main camo decals to dry overnight, I came back and added all the other transfers, the skull markings, the Ukrainian national symbols, and all the various stencils. I should also say that once on, the decals do look superb, with a real painted on appearance. Once the decals were completely dry, it was time for finishing. The first step here was a pin wash in the panel lines of the upper surfaces, as I wanted to keep the airframe looking relatively clean. I used a grey oil wash here, which provided good contrast against both the light and dark greys of the camouflage. For the undersides, I used a slightly darker grey shade and applied it all over. And when dried, I removed the excess with a makeup applicator dampened with white spirit. Undercarriage, doors, pitot tube and EOS transparency were then all added to complete the aircraft. Let's have a look to see how it turned out. Now I should start here by stating once again that ICM sent me the kit and paints over for this review, but I've not received any payment from them and I'm under no obligation to say anything nice here. Overall, this is a nice little package, and whilst the moulding is clearly one of ICM's older generations, it's still a decent little kit which builds up into an accurate and very handsome model. It does have some issues, with areas needing cleanup and filling, some fitment problems, and those challenging camo decals. Though nothing an experienced modeller wouldn't take in their stride, I wouldn't say this is a beginner-friendly kit. If you put in the work, however, what you get at the end is an extremely handsome and pretty accurate MiG-29. Some areas, like the cockpit and exhausts, are simplified, but there are plenty of aftermarket add-ons should you wish to super detail these areas. The other thing to consider is that this kit can generally be picked up for £17 or £18 in the UK, which isn't much for a kit with such extensive decals as this. Yes, they're not the easiest to use, but the results they produce are excellent, and hopefully, as I've demonstrated here, you can make a convincing digital camo model without using an airbrush, which is pretty neat. Now of course the Ghost of Kyiv is symbolic rather than an actual aircraft, but don't let that put you off, and there's nothing stopping you using this as a basis for any other Ukrainian MiG-29. The symbology and lettering you get inside give you an almost unlimited scope in this regard, which is also nice. Overall, the kit gets a respectable 70%, similar to the Bronco J20 and the Zvezda SU-57, which feels about right. A kit from a 15-year-old mould that costs under £20 and produces this kind of result has to be a solid silver recommendation to any experienced modeller, though I think you really do need that experience to get the best out of the kit. As for the ICM paints, I had no expectations from them and was pleasantly surprised in working with them. They're definitely very good for brush painting, and I'll look more into using them in the airbrush in the future, so make sure you're subbed to get notified when the full build Beaufort review video is out, and I can give you an update then. If you want to win the collector's coin commemorating Flight Lieutenant Alan Pollock's protest by flying Hawker Hunter XF442 through the span of Tower Bridge on April 4th, 1968, then you can enter my free draw for that, details are in my video unboxing of the kit bookmarked above. Alternatively, you can join my YouTube channel as a member or sign up to my Patreon to be automatically entered into this and other draws with multiple tickets and so a higher chance to win, plus have access to my personal Discord channel and other perks. As I'm mentioning that, let me give my heartfelt thanks to all of those wonderful channel members and Patreon subscribers for helping me to make these videos. It only then remains for me to give my thanks to Valeria and Dania at ICM for sending me the review sample. I wish you all the best and hope that the conflict in your country is resolved soon. That's all for this instalment of Man's Model Moments. If you enjoyed the video, please click the like button, subscribe to the channel for more like it, and share this video with others you think would also enjoy it. You can also follow me on Instagram, Twitter and Facebook, and if you're feeling generous then I also have a Patreon, which is absolutely the best way of helping me to grow the channel and produce more content like this. With that, I hope you have plenty of modelling moments of your own, and I look forward to welcoming you on the next video.